Yeah, good morning students. Today we are going to discuss one more NTA paper. So in this, let's look at the first question. It's given that three identical spherical shells, each of mass m and radius r, are placed as shown in the figure. Then they are asking you to find out the moment of inertia of these three spherical shells about this axis, right? You know the moment of inertia of a spherical shell generally about the center of mass, it's given by 2 by 3 mr square. This is the moment of inertia of a spherical shell about any axis passing through its center. Now here you can see moment of inertia of this spherical shell will be 2 by 3 mr square, and moment of inertia of this spherical shell about this axis. What you can write here about this axis, the moment of inertia will be about this axis. About this axis, we can see it is 2 by 3 mr square. So about this axis, if you apply parallel axis theorem, then the moment of inertia will become moment of inertia about center of mass, that's 2 by 3 mr square plus m into this distance. How much it is? R square. So that will become 5 by 3 mr square. This is the moment of inertia about this axis. This is the moment of inertia about center of mass axis. This is IC. So based on this, the moment of inertia of this is 2 by 3 mr square. Then these two, that will be means this one is 5 by 3 mr square and this one is also 5 by 3 mr square. So it will be 10 by 3 mr square plus 2 by 3 mr square, that will be 12 by 3 mr square. So directly you can say it will be 4 mr square. Is it okay? See, moment of inertia of this 2 by 3 mr square, the upper one, and the lower one, it is 5 by 3 mr square. We got it here. But we have two spheres, so 2 into 5 by 3. That will be total 12 mr square by 3. That's nothing but 4 mr square. You can directly solve it, like by looking at the question also you can solve it. Just you can do the calculation in your mind and you can get the answer directly within a second. Within a, 30 seconds. Right? So that's the thing. Let's look into the second question. Two slits S1 and S2 are illuminated by a white light source. Give a white central maxima. A transparent sheet of refractive index 1.25 and thickness T1 is placed in front of S1 and another sheet is placed in front of S2. Then if the central maxima is not affected, then what is the ratio of T1 and T2? Okay, two slits are there here. So generally here we will be having central maxima. So here you have kept one slit, one sheet which is having refractive index nu1 and thickness T1. Here you have kept one more sheet. This is nu1 with the thickness T1. This is nu2 with the thickness T2. Right? S1, S2. S1 and S2. Right? Now, if you observe here, what is the path difference between these two rays? What is the path length traveled by this one? Let's say this is point P. What is the path length traveled by this one here? S1P. Right? It's traveling a path length of S1P. Then you can see it is traveling a optical path length of nu1 T1. So subtract this T1 first. It's actually traveling nu1 T1. So this is the total path length traveled by the first ray. S1p minus T1 plus nu1 T1. Similarly, this one, how much optical path length it's traveling here? So this is the total path length traveled by this minus, we are writing delta x, path difference. This is the first one. Then second one is how much here? This is how much? S2p. That is S2p. Now you have a sheet of thickness T2, right? In air, it actually travels nu to T2, right? It travels nu to T2. So that nu to T2 you need to consider, and you need to subtract that T2. So, so the path length traveled by this ray will be minus T2 plus nu to T2. The optical path length, if you consider, that will be nu times of the path length here. Whenever a ray travels in a medium of refractive index nu, it is nu into T is the actual path length traveled by it. So that's why nu to T2, and T2 should be subtracted. So this is the path length traveled by the first ray and path length traveled by the ray from the second source, from the first source and second source, and path difference is this minus this. So now if you observe this, so delta x is how much here? S1p minus S2p plus nu1 T1 minus nu2 T2 plus T2 minus T1, right? S1p minus S2p, that should be 0, because this path difference is the central maxima. You can see this length and this length should be 0 because it's forming a maxima. Initially, when you place S1, S2, it's forming maxima here, central maxima. It means that S1p minus S2p should be 0. Now, again, it's given that the central maxima is not affected. Even after keeping this one and this one, two slabs, central maxima is not getting affected. If it's not getting affected, the meaning is delta x should be again 0, because the path difference should be 0 for central maxima. It means delta x is 0. Then what you are left here? nu1 T1 minus nu2 T2 plus T2 minus T1, right? Then substitute the values here. How much is nu1? 1.25 and nu2 is 1.5. So nu1 is 1.25 T1, nu2 is 1.5 T2 plus T2 minus T1. From this, what you can say? 1.25 T1 minus T1, that will be 1.25 minus plus 0.25, 0.25 T1, 1.5 this one, that is minus 0.5 T2. It means 0.5 T2 equals to 0.25 T1. It's just calculation you need to do here. They are asking what? T1 by T2. T1 by T2, etc. T1 by T2. How much it is? 0.5 by 0.25. That will be 2, right? So 2 is to 1. Yes or no? That will be 2 is to 1. 0.5, 0.5 times, and 0.5 is 1 by 2, so it will be 2 by 1. Okay, everybody, right? That's the thing. So look here once again. Two slits S1, S2, when you keep any slab, the path length traveled by this, it will be S1p minus T1 plus nu1 T1. Similarly, from here to here, S2p, remember S2p minus T2 plus nu2 T2. Remove the path in the air, that is T2. and add the optical path nu to T2. So S2P plus T2 minus nu to, plus nu to T2 minus T2. Remember this. And we also know that before it also it's forming central maxima over there, later also it's forming central maxima. That means S1P minus S2P should be 0. Later also it's forming central maxima, so path difference from here to here and here to here should be 0, so delta x should be 0. That's it. Then substitute the values, you will get the T1 T2 ratio. Clear everyone, right? That's it. Okay, then let's look into next question. Magnetics. Two long parallel conductors, they are placed like this. Each one is this is located at x equals to 2 and this is located at x equals to 6. It's not like this is distance is 6, something like that. This is x equals to, this is x equals to 6. Then they are carrying currents 1 and 3 ampere. Then they produce zero magnetic field. Where they produce zero magnetic field? Obviously you can see that current is flowing in this direction, right? So there is a magnetic field into the plane in this region, right? In between the two conductors, the magnetic field is into the plane due to the first one, like this, right? Ampere's law. Then due to this, here magnetic field is into the plane, then here magnetic field is out of the plane. So due to this into the plane, due to this out of the plane, then somewhere the net magnetic field should be 0, right? Now look here. Due to this, what is the magnetic field? Magnetic field is what? Nu naught I by 2 pi r. Yes sir? Magnetic field is nu naught I by 2 pi r due to the first one. And due to the second one, nu naught I1 R1, let's say, nu naught I2 by 2 pi R2. Somewhere, we don't know. This is R1, this is R2. We don't know. Somewhere. R1, R2 distances. Both should be equal and opposite, right? When you equate this, what do you get? I1 by R1 equals to I2 by R2. Why you are equating? One is into the plane, one is out of the plane. And the net should be 0. That implies this should be equals to this. I mean, this minus this equals 0. It means this should be equals to this. Simple. Yes or no? Right? Chalo. I1 is 1. What about R1? R1 is R1. Okay. Write it. Then I2 is 3 by R2. It means your R2 equals to 3R1. R2 equals to 3R1. And what is R1 plus R2? R1 plus R2 is 4, right? Yes sir. This is x equals to 2. This is x equals to 6. So what is this distance? 4. Okay everybody? Basic thing. This is 4. Right. Now R2 is 3R1. Substitute that. 3R1. Then what is R1? R1 equals to 1 centimeter. R1, 1 centimeter. It means this distance is 1. This is already x equals to 2. And this is 1. It means what is this? X equals to 3. 3 centimeter mark. Simple. People will do everything, but later the simple calculation they will be missing out. So you should be good with this calculation also. Apart from this, you should be good with this also. You have to find out the exact location of the point where the net magnetic field is 0. Understood everybody? Right? Okay. Now let's look into another question. Charges Q, 2Q minus Q are given. Q, 2Q minus Q. Then what is the ratio of the charges of the inner and outer surface of the shell C? After redistribution, what is the ratio of the charge on the inner and outer surface of shell C. Direct question, simple question. You know, basically Gauss law, right? You can see the charge enclosed means in the conductor should be 0, or you can say the net electric field in the conductor should be 0. By using that concept, we know very well inside there won't be any charge. Entire charge will come out here, right? Because there should not be any field here. So entire charge will be here itself, Q. To balance that Q, there should be minus Q, which should come on the inner surface, right? C. That's it. Here Q. How much should be here? Here it should be minus Q, so that the net will be 0. If minus Q is coming here, then outside how much it should be? Outside it should be 3Q. Why? 3Q plus minus Q. Total is 2Q. Total charge on this will be how much? 2Q. That's why it should be 3Q here. If this is 3Q, then how much here it should be? Here it should be minus 3Q. If minus 3Q is here, then what is the remaining left out? Outside it should be 2Q. Why? Minus 3Q plus 2Q. Minus 3Q plus 2Q. How much it is? Minus Q. Minus Q, it should be minus Q, total minus Q. That's it, simple. What is the ratio? Inner to outer. Inner and outer. Inner and outer, how much? Minus 3 by 2. Careful. Minus 3 by 2. Inner, outer. Inner, outer. Minus 3 by 2. Minus 3 by 2. Understand? Right? That's it. A container with insulating walls is divided into two equal parts by a partition fitted with a valve. One part is filled with an ideal gas at temperature T and pressure P, and the other is evacuated completely. Then if the valve is suddenly opened, the pressure and temperature of the gas will be. You can see basically here it's an evacuated, other portion is evacuated here. You have two portions. Here pressure P, volume V, temperature T. It's completely evacuated. The meaning is what? The pressure is 0 here, right? And volume is V. When you release this, here the pressure is 0. It means what is the work done? It's like free expansion, right? Freely it will expand because there is no external force, there is no external pressure. So freely it will expand. When freely it expands, the work done will be 0, right? And there is no delta Q here because it's insulated, right? Delta Q is also 0. Then what do you say about delta U? Delta U is also 0. Yes or no? When delta W 0, delta Q 0, delta U must be 0. If delta U is 0, the meaning is temperature is constant, we can say. Free expansion is happening. Free expansion. Free expansion is happening here. Delta Q is 0, what is the reason? Insulated. Insulated one. Then delta U will be 0. If delta U is 0, the temperature is constant. So by keeping these things in mind, what will happen finally? Finally the volume becomes 2V. It means the pressure should become P by 2. And temperature is T. Right? Yes or no? Temperature is constant. Volume is increasing 2 times, so pressure will decrease by half. So pressure becomes P by 2, volume becomes 2V. That's it. So whenever they say there is a free expansion, just keep it in mind, temperature is constant. Yes or no? Right? That's the thing. So it's P by 2 and temperature will be T itself. Clear everybody? Right. Let's look into the next question. Man is running at a speed of 5 km per hour. Finds that the rain is falling vertically. When he stops running, he finds that the rain is falling at an angle of 60. The velocity of rain with respect to running man is. Keep few things in mind. See, when a man is running, this is the velocity of man, right? It's given that rain is falling vertically. The rain is falling vertically. Okay, velocity of rain. So this is the velocity of rain with respect to man, right? Because the man is running here. It's not like velocity of rain with respect to ground. If man is at rest, then some rain is falling. Yeah, we can say that that's the velocity of rain with respect to ground. If someone is standing and observing the rain, okay, that's the velocity of rain with respect to ground. But here the man is running already. So this is the velocity of rain with respect to man. Now, later, in the second case, it's case 1. In case 2, the man is at rest. He is at rest. And the rain is falling at an angle of 60 degrees with the horizontal. So rain is falling at an angle of 60. The velocity of rain now with respect to ground. Rain is falling at an angle of 60 degrees with the horizontal here. This is a 60 degrees with the horizontal, right? Now, what you can say is, see, you may get some doubt like velocity of rain can be like this also. It can, it can do 60 degrees in this manner as well, right? How to check whether it is this case or this case? See, when man is running like this, the rain is falling in this manner. When man is at rest, the rain should fall like this. Why? Because when you write the velocity of man, see, this is the velocity of man, velocity of rain. Generally, how it will be like? What is the velocity of rain with respect to man? That is VR minus Vm. VR minus Vm means what? This is VR. Minus Vm means this is minus Vm. What is the resultant of these two? It will be like this, right? The resultant is coming in this direction. It means the velocity of, so when man is running, the rain appears to fall like this to the man, right? It appears to fall like this in this direction. So when man is running, the rain is falling, it's given here. When man is running, the rain is falling vertically downwards. The meaning is it should already be tilted in this manner. Then it will come to this side. Means that's a vector concept you need to understand. If you take like this already, if you take like this, then when man is running, what it becomes? See, what it will become when man is running like this. If you take velocity of rain in this manner, what will be the resultant of these two? Velocity of rain minus velocity of man. Then it will go like this, something like this. Yes or no? The resultant will become this thing. But it should not be the case. Our resultant should become vertical when man is running. So that's why this case will be eliminated. This case will be eliminated. It should be like this. Just take and see. Take this case and this case, both the cases, and check when you will get velocity of rain with respect to man like this, vertical. That's how you have to look into this. Now, come here. Okay, now how to solve this one here? See, velocity of rain with respect to ground is given like this for us, velocity of rain. What is its components here? What you can write along x-axis? VR cos 60. Cos 60 is how much? Root 3. Cos 60 will be 1 by 2 minus VR sin 60. This is a VR actually, right? Velocity of rain, right? Now, here it's given, what is given here? Velocity of rain with respect to man. That is velocity of rain minus velocity of man. Velocity of rain is what? This one, right? VR I by 2 minus VR root 3 by 2 j cap. Velocity of man is what? Velocity of man is this one. 5 I cap is moving with 5 along x-axis, right? Now, what you are getting here? VRM. What is VRM? VRM direction is what? VRM is completely vertical, right? VRM is vertical or not? Does this VRM vector, does it having any horizontal component? There is no horizontal component. It means this horizontal things here. What is this horizontal thing? VR by 2 minus 5 I cap minus VR root 3 by 2 j cap. This is the horizontal thing. This horizontal thing should become 0 because your velocity of rain with respect to man is completely vertical. Velocity of rain with respect to man is completely vertical. It means your horizontal component should become 0. See, don't worry. It's a basic questions only. The thing is, just write mathematically. What is given here, just write that mathematically, you will get the answer, that's it. You don't need to think much. Only thing you need to think is whether you have to take VRG in this manner or in this manner. That's the only thing you need to think. The remaining is simply mathematical. Now just see the question from here. If you look into the complete thing, then it looks like big, lengthy one. Now just look from here. VRM is given like this. VM given like this. Then velocity of rain with respect to ground is this one. Write its vector form. Vector, you know, right? How to write? There is a velocity there like this. Then what is its horizontal component? VR cos 60. What is vertical component? VR sin 60. Vertical component is downwards, right? This is a horizontal. This is a vertical. Yes or no? So this one. Next, what is VRM means? What is VAB? Velocity of A with respect to B. That is VA minus VB. So VRM is VR minus VM. Then VR is what? This one. VM is what? This one. But we know what? VRM should be vertically downwards. It means this should become 0. When it becomes 0, what is your VR? VR will get 10. Right? You are getting VR as 10. Then what is your VRM they are asking here? What they are asking, velocity of rain with respect to running man. What is velocity of rain with respect to running man? This and this, right? This is already 0. Substitute VR here, 5 root 3 by 2. That's it. That is the VRM. Your VRM will be minus 5 root 3 by, it will be 5 root 3, right? Because 10 root 3 by 2, that will be 5 root 3. This is the answer. Right. Let's look into the next question. Potentiometer concept. Yeah, whenever you see question, definitely many of you will leave this. But the thing is, just try to write basic potentiometer diagram. When you write the potentiometer diagram, you will definitely get this thing here. It's very simple thing. Just write the basic diagram here. See, what is the potentiometer concept here? Here you have a battery. It's a primary battery, or you can say that's a standard cell. EMF. Now you have a wire. The wire, potentiometer wire. Here you have one cell jockey. You'll be moving it. You'll be adjusting it so that the current in this should become 0. This is the condition for balancing point. Now this is the question here. See, it's a basic simple question. IG is 0 here, right? Ig is 0. So in this branch there is no current. From here some current is coming here, it's going like this, right? If this total wire is having a resistance R, just a thing, basic thing, what do you write about this formula here? E equals to IR. Yes or no? E equals to IR. Now from here to here, this portion is having a resistance R dash, let's say. Then what is the potential difference between these 2 points? There is a resistance R dash here, current I is flowing here. Then what do you say about the potential drop? I into R dash? Yes or no? R dash resistance, total resistance is how much? R. Here resistance of this portion, length is decreased, so resistance will decrease. What is the resistance of this portion? R dash. Then what is the potential difference? I into R dash. I into R dash. The potential difference between these 2 points should be same as these 2 points. Here it is, let's say E dash. Some internal resistance is there, but the current is how much? 0. When current is 0, what is the potential difference between these 2 points? These 2 points. E dash itself. There is no current flowing here. If some current is flowing, then it is E dash minus I into R. E dash plus I into R. It may be anything. But here there is no current in this branch because it's at the balancing point. Balancing point means current in this branch will be 0. The potential difference is what? E dash here. So E dash must be equals to potential difference between these 2 points. How much it is? I into R dash. So your E dash equals to I into R dash. Take the ratio. E by E dash. R will be R by R dash. What is R here? R is rho L by E. Resistance of the entire wire. Entire wire is having length L, let's say. Then what is the resistance? Rho L by A. This portion, the small portion, rho, its length is, let's say, X by A. This length is X, let's say. Then rho X by A. Then what do you get? E by E dash L by X. Then E dash equals to EX by L. E into, how much is this length here? This length 30 centimeter, it's given here. 30. How much is this total length here? 100 centimeter. 100. What is this? 0.3. That's it. 0.3. So whenever potentiometer is given, just remember the basic diagram. This diagram, if you don't remember, you will not get there. Nothing you will get. You should know what is potentiometer, right? Basic diagram. There will be a lot of complicated diagrams in the NCERT textbook and all those things. That's not needed. Okay, just look into the simple diagram. E is the primary, secondary. Primary branch, secondary branch. In this primary branch, how to write these things here? Here it is balanced. When it is balanced, there is no current flowing through this. So just don't worry about this. Simply write the basic formula. E equals IR. What is R? Total resistance of the wire. What do you write about R? R equals rho L by A, where L is the length of the wire. Now when there is no current here, what is the potential difference? E dash. If this is E dash, then what is the potential difference between these 2 points? This current I into R dash. That's it, simple. You will get like this always, E dash equals to EX by L. If you remember this formula also, you can get the answer, right? Chalo. Let's look into the next question. Uranium-238 decays into thorium, and then thorium is having a half-life of 5 into 10 power 9. Then the resulting nucleus is then in the excited state and hence further emits gamma rays to come to the ground state. It emits 20 gamma rays per second. Then what is the emission rate? The emission rate will drop to 5 gamma rays per second. In how much time? The emission rate will drop to this much. Uranium is emitting thorium. and the thorium which is coming here, it's not like completely stable, it's in the excited state. So the thorium also starts emitting some gamma rays. It will be keep on emitting gamma rays. Initially it emits more gamma rays, later it will emit less gamma rays. So how to find out this? Generally in case of decay, dN by dt, right, rate of disintegration minus of dN by dt. This you can write it as, so minus of dN by dt, that is generally proportional to your n, where n is the number of nucleons, right? Rate of disintegration will be proportional to n. Or you can also write dN by dt equals to lambda into n. What is this? This is also known as activity, right? Rate of disintegration is also known as activity here, which is equal to lambda into n. You can see that initially you are having a number of it emits 20 gamma rays per second here, means this activity is initially 20, right? Later initially, then what is happening to your dN by dt finally? That is your lambda into n, that is 5. Then what do you say from this? N naught by n equals to 4, right? And what is n here? N equals to n naught by 4. And also what is n formula? N equals to n naught into e power minus lambda t. So that is n naught by 4, right? So lambda t equals to ln 4. Can you able to do this? I directly wrote this. E power minus lambda t is there. Take ln on both sides. Ln on both sides. E power minus lambda t becomes minus lambda t. Then ln 1 by 4. ln 1 by 4 becomes minus ln 4. Then minus minus gone. So lambda t equals to ln 4. Yes or no? You do step by step if you want, right? That's the thing. Then lambda is what? ln 2 by t half. Then what is ln 4? ln 4 is 2 ln 2. Yes or no? Simple. This is gone. T equals to 2 times t half. So what do you say here is given t half is 5 in 10 power 9. So 2 times means 10 into 10 power 9. 10 in 10 power 9 is 10 power 10 years. That's it. That's it. That's the thing about this question, 10 power 10 years, right? You can easily do it. A smooth steel ball strikes a fixed smooth steel plate at an angle theta with a vertical, right? The quotient of restitution is E, then the angle at which the rebound will take place. Collisions question, right? What is given here? It falls. At what angle? It strikes at an angle of theta. Quotient of restitution is E, then the angle at which the rebound takes place. If it is falling with speed u, we know that this is u cos theta, and this is u sin theta. After rebounding, let's say its speed is v, we don't know. U sin theta is the horizontal component here. This horizontal component will remain same, everybody know it, right? Yes or no? It doesn't change because the impact is along y-axis. So along x-axis the momentum remains same. It's coming with mu sin theta. So after that also it will be u sin theta only, right? Another thing, This is coming with u cos theta. What is coming here? Nothing is coming. The thing is, the vertical component is u cos theta, right? If it is u cos theta, and if the coefficient of restitution is E, then it will rebound with EU cos theta. Everybody knows this point, I think, right? See, if a ball is falling here, if it is coming with speed u, if the coefficient of restitution is E, then it will bounce back with EU. Similarly, if it is coming with u cos theta, then it will bounce back with EU cos theta. Understand? It will bounce back with EU cos theta, right? So that's the thing. So it will bounce back with EU cos theta. EU cos theta. Let's say your final velocity is making an angle alpha, we don't know. We need to find out. Then what do you write about tan alpha? Tan alpha. This component, what is this component? This one, u sin theta by this component. What is this component? EU cos theta. After, then what do you get? Tan theta by E. Then what is your alpha? Tan inverse of tan theta by E. That's it. Understood, everybody? See, after collision, u sin theta evada, EU cos theta evada. This is your final velocity v, which is making an angle alpha. Then what do you write? Tan alpha. Tan alpha is this by this. Hope it's clear. Everybody? Yes or no? That's how I wrote. That's it. Look into the next question. 1 gram of water at 100 degrees C is completely converted into steam at 100 degrees C. 1 gram of steam occupies a volume of 1650. Then you will be having, question numbers are not there, just take care of that. It's 33. Completely converted into steam at 100 degrees C. So 1 gram of steam occupies a volume of 1650. Then the increase in internal energy in joules is given by. So water is converting in the form of steam here. They are asking you to neglect the volume of water, 1 gram of water, which is at 100 degrees C. So steam, some volume is there. What is the volume of steam here? 1650 centimeter cube, right? Then what is the increase in internal energy they are asking here? First of all, what is the work done during this process? Delta W P into delta V here. The pressure is constant, which is happening at 1 atmospheric pressure. 1 atmospheric pressure means 10 power 5 Newton per meter square, and volume changes final volume minus initial volume. They are asking you to take initial volume as 0. Then what is the work done here? 10 power 5 into final volume, that is 1650 centimeter cube. 1 centimeter is 10 power minus 2 meter, so centimeter cube is 10 power minus 6. So this is the work done in the joules. That will be 165 joules, you can write clearly. Right? 165 joules. Then how to write your heat supplied to this process? You are converting water in the form of steam, so you have to supply heat. How much is the heat supplied here? Heat supplied delta Q equals to M into L, latent heat of vaporization, right? It's what here? 1 gram of water, 1 gram. Latent heat of vaporization is 540 calories per gram. So 540. Then you will get what? 540 calories. But we need in terms of joules. So how much you will get? 540 into 4.2. 4.2 joules. Right? So this 540 into 4.2, you will be getting it as 2268. 2268. Okay, 2268. So 2268 joules is your heat supplied. Then what is the increase in internal energy? Increase in internal energy equals to delta Q minus delta W. heat supplied, you are supplying 2268 and you are doing a work of 165. So that gives you 2103. Right? That's the thing. Clear, everybody? Understood? That's the thing about this question. This is question number 33. Understood? Right. Now, let's look into the another question. Yeah, simple pendulum, mass is connected. So, total length is L. Here there is one pivot. Pivot point is there somewhere here. Then after heating this, so it will come like this. Heat here. After heating here, some portion only will go like this, right? Because this will be heating here, right? This portion will be obstructed by this pivot here. Then only the remaining portion will go, right? Then what is this theta? How to get this value of theta here? Draw the diagram properly here. Then you can able to solve it. The thing you can do energy conservation here. If you choose 2 points where you can write easily, energy conservation you can do from anywhere to anywhere, right? So if you choose 2 easy points where let's say the speed is 0 at this point, right? Finally also at this point the speed will be 0. So you don't need to write anything about kinetic energy. If you choose these 2 points as initial and final points, only you have to write about the potential energy here. Yes or no? So potential energy also, if you want to write, you have to take somewhere as potential energy 0. That is the reference point, so that you can write the potential energy at the other points. So that's the idea here. Now look here. Right? See, after that it goes somewhere like this. Just think that it is coming till here. Then this is L. This is L. Then what is this total thing? This thing from here to here. This is your alpha, right? So L cos alpha. And then this is theta. So what is this? This length is how much? This is L. So this will be L minus L. This will be L minus L, right? L minus L. Then what is this thing? L minus L cos alpha, cos theta. Right. Now, I am considering here the potential energy 0 at this level. Potential energy is 0 here. Then what is the potential energy at this level? This level. This level potential energy 0. So at this level, you should know about this thing. This thing. What is this height? See, the ball is lifted up at this point here. It can be somewhere here also. Okay, just for understanding, I'm drawing little bit here. Don't think that it is this much length, then after coming here, how it will become this much. It can be somewhere here. Okay, but for I had to show some difference so that you can understand here. Okay, so what is this length? This length will be total from here to here will be L cos alpha. Okay, L cos alpha. Then here it is L, and this will be this much. So what is this thing here? This thing. This thing will be your from here to here total L cos alpha. Then subtract L, subtract this thing, then this is this height, MGH. potential energy at this point, which is equals to potential energy at this point, because the kinetic energy here is 0, here kinetic energy is 0, potential energy at this point equals to potential energy at this point. Here the potential energy we are assuming it as 0, and here also it should become 0. Yes or no? Or delta H you can see, anything. This is assumed as ground level, okay. Then above this potential energy mgh. What is this? This is the height h. What is that h? This much. mgh, okay. Potential energy initial equals to potential energy final. Initial 0, final also 0. Kinetic energy 0 initially, final also 0. Yes or no? Otherwise you have to take this is ground, then this is h, this is h plus h dash. It's like no need. Understood? Potential energy is a reference thing. Don't think that potential energy is 0, kinetic energy is 0, total energy is 0. No, not like that. Okay? It's a reference thing. Understand? Now, what do you write? L cos alpha equals to L plus L minus L cos theta. Actually, what we need to find? We need to find theta, right? Chalo, theta you find out here. L cos alpha minus L by L minus L. That is your cos theta. This is a cos theta. Then what is theta? Cos inverse of L cos alpha minus L by L minus L. That's your option B. Cos inverse you get. Clear everybody? Understood? Potential energy, bicep, don't get confused here. You can write potential, you can take some ground and that's a potential energy 0. Then from there you can take potential energy mgh at this point. Here you can take mgh plus h dash. In that way also you can do. Initial equals to final. mgh gets cancelled, you will get left with mgh dash only finally. Okay na? Okay. Understand? Shall we go for next question? Right? A stretched wire of length L are fixed at x equals 0, x equals L. In one experiment, the displacement of the wire is like this and energy is E1. And in another experiment, its displacement is this and energy is E2. Okay, you are doing some interference of waves. Standing waves are formed here. Okay, their energies are there. Sine of pi x by L and pi sin omega t is there. Here sin of 2 pi x by L, sin 2 omega t is there. So initial waves, the waves which you are sending, they have frequency of omega here, right? I mean the angular frequency omega. In this case you can see the angular frequency is 2 omega. So frequency is increased here and amplitude is same for both the waves. And the energy is actually depends upon what? Energy which is proportional to amplitude square and frequency square. Amplitude is same, but frequency is doubled here. It is 2 omega here. Then what will happen to energy here? Energy will increase by 4 times. It means E2 is how much? 4 E1, that's it. Are yes or no? Understand? If you want to write, you can write E1 equals to, that is a square f square, and E2 is proportional to a square 2f square. Omega is increased by 2 times, so frequency also increased by 2 times. Yes or no? So what is E2 by E1? 4. Then E2 is 4 E1. That's it. Simple question. Understand? Don't think too much. Energy depends upon amplitude and frequency. Shall we move for the next question? Right? Understand? Capacitance question. Capacitance of 2 microfarad is required in an electrical circuit. A large number of 1 microfarad capacitors are available which can withstand potential difference of not more than 300 volt. Then the minimum number of capacitors required to achieve this. 2 microfarad is we required. The total capacitance should be 2 microfarad, right? we have to get 2 microfarad here. In capacitors, when they are connected in series, I think you know the equivalent capacitance. If I connect 4 capacitors like this, each one capacitance of 1 microfarad, then what is the equivalent capacitance? 1/4, everybody know it? All of you, yes or no? Everybody know it or not? Series 1/4. In parallel it will be 4. Chalo. Look here, first of all, the capacitor can withstand a potential of maximum 300 volt only. See, before going for the solution, you try to read the question by yourself clearly and then try to understand. If possible, try to solve also. If you don't get it, then you go to the solution. Understand, right? And try to learn some concepts also through these solutions. Okay. Now, the thing is, the potential difference should not be more than 300, and you are connecting to a potential of 1 kilovolt. 1 kilovolt means 1000 volt, right? So, look here, for a 1000 volt supply, if I put 2 capacitors, let's say, what will happen? If I put 2 capacitors, what is the potential difference across each? 500. Yes sir, simple, right? Do they withstand 500? No. They can withstand maximum of 300 only. So if you put 2, they will get damaged. Let's say if you are putting 3, chalo, I'll keep 3. What will happen? How much? Each one will become some 333, right? 333.33, something like this, whatever. But they can withstand how much maximum? 300 only, right? So 333, again damage. Now you put 4. Chalo, I will be putting 4. When I keep 4, what will happen? When I keep 4, how much across each? 250. Do they damage? No, they are not going to damage. So 4 you have to keep minimum, and they are asking for minimum number of capacitors. So don't try to put 5, 6. You can put 5, 6 in, but the capacitor number will increase. That's not the thing which we need to do here. We need to minimize the capacitors. But that doesn't mean I will keep only 1 capacitor. If you keep 1, then it will damage. 2 also damage. 3 also damage. 4, yes. Understand? So 4 capacitors you are keeping like this. Now what do you do? So 4 you are keeping. If you keep 4 like this, how much capacitance you are going to get? You are going to get only 1/4 microfarad, but they are asking you to achieve how much? 2 microfarad. 1/4 is also not sufficient for us. We have to make it 2. How to make it 2? Keep one more row. How much this will also give? This will also give 1/4. Total how much? 1/2. Right? Then what you do? Keep one more row. 1/2 will be added. Keep one more row. 1/2 will be added. Then total how much it will become? 1 only. Still it will be 1 only. So you have to make how many number of rows? 8 rows. 8 rows, each row 1/4. Total it will become 2. It means you have to make 8 rows here. Total 8 rows should be connected like this. Understand? If you make 8 rows, then you will get the C equivalent as 2 microfarad. 8 into 1/4 each. So 8 rows, each row 4. It means how much? 32. 4 8 are 32. Understand? So that's the thing. If you don't understand, go back and listen to the solution once again. You will get to know. You had two conditions here. One is you should not make the potential difference more than 300. The other one is the capacitance should become for total 2 microfarad we need to achieve. So two conditions should be satisfied, and that too with minimum number of capacitors. So the only way is by making 32. You can increase 5, 6, 7 also like this. You can make more number of capacitors, then it will become 1 by 8 also. Then you increase the number of rows, then it will become more. That also you can do. But we need minimum. Minimum is 32. Right. Let's look into the next question. Young's double slit experiment. Slits are separated by 0.5 mm and the screen is placed at 150 centimeter away. A beam of light consisting of two wavelengths. The question number 42. 0.5. The screen is placed 150 centimeter away. A beam of light consisting of two wavelengths is used to obtain interference fringes on the screen. So the least distance from the common central maxima to the point where the bright fringes due to both the wavelengths coincide. Where they coincide here? I'm leaving this space. Look here. The bright, somewhere the brightness is occurring here. I think everybody know the basic thing about this is theta, then this is theta, the path reference delta x, this is capital D, this is small d, and somewhere it is y. Always just remember these formulas here, y by d. Always remember this diagram, this setup, and these two formulas here, tan theta y by d, sin theta delta x by d here in this triangle. Sin theta equals to opposite side by hypotenuse, delta x by d. Then tan theta equals to y by d in this triangle. Remember these two. And sin theta equals tan theta when theta is small. And from this what you will get? Y by d equals to delta x by d. Then y equals to delta x, or delta x equals to y into small d by capital D. It's helpful. Remember this setup. So useful for you many times. So this is best thing you can remember this. Okay. If you remember the formula directly, you can use it also. No need. Now they are saying somewhere you will be getting. You are sending two light rays of two different wavelengths. Okay. One is 650, other one is 520. So 650 is forming, let's say, a bright fringe, some nth bright fringe at a point y1. Then what do you say about 650 here? Y1 equals to, what is delta x at that point? Delta x equals to n lambda, right? All of you clear with this or not? Whenever when there is a maxima, what is delta x? Delta x is n lambda. So lambda 1, then second one is forming mth maxima somewhere, mth maxima, this is nth maxima, then that is happening at y2, but they said both are coinciding, so y1 equals to y2, it means n lambda 1 equals to m lambda 2, it means n into lambda 1 is how much? 520, 650, first one, and lambda 2 is 520. So 13 5 13 52, 13 5 13 4. So from this what you obtain? 5n equals to 4m. What is the minimum values of n and m here? N should be equals to 4, m should be equals to 5. That's the least values, right? They are asking the minimum. Okay, the least distance from the common central maxima means from here, what could be the minimum distance? So if you want to get the minimum things, then you have to take the minimum values of n and m. That will be 5 and 4. Are yes or no? 4 and 5. Now, then what is the value of y? Y is how much? Calculate y value. So calculate. What is this y1 here? Substitute the values. Y1 equals to n into, n is how much? N is 4. Lambda 1, 650. N lambda d. What is d? Capital D is 150 centimeters. So 10 power minus 2. Then by small d, 650 nanometer, right? So nanometer means 10 power minus 9 meters. Then small d is how much? 0.5 mm. 0.5 mm means 10 power minus 3. Okay, little bit calculation is there. So this is the thing, 4 into 65 into 15. How many are 1, 2? These 2 will cancel with this thing. 10 power minus 9 by 5 into 10 power minus 4 here. Okay, 5 3 there. And then 65 into 12 into 10 power minus 5. This is okay. Then that's actually giving you 780, I think, right? 780 into 10 power minus 5. That's actually giving you 7.8 into 10 power minus 3 meter. That's nothing but 7.8 mm. Chalo. Okay, 7.8 mm you'll be getting. Just check the calculation, okay? That's the thing. Right. So that's the thing here. They are coinciding at some point. So n lambda 1 equals to m lambda 2. Then n and m, the values of n and m, the minimum values you have to get. So that will be n equals to 4 and m equals to 5. Right. Next. Last question. Right. The particle is projected with a velocity v naught along x-axis. Then the deceleration of the particle is proportional to square of the distance from the origin. A equals to minus x square. Then the distance at which the particle stops, where the particle will stop. So basically in this type of question, try to apply work energy theorem here. Somewhere the particle is stopping means kinetic energy becomes 0, and initially we have given some velocity v naught, so there is some kinetic energy here initially. So work done equals to change in kinetic energy, and work done you can write easily because the force is mass into acceleration, right? And acceleration is in the form of it depends upon x here. Right? So it's easy to find the work done here, right? What is the concept? Work done equals to change in kinetic energy. Don't go with kinematics and all. It will become little tough. Yeah, you can do it. Acceleration you can write v dv by dx. In that way also you can get it very easily also. But most of the times work energy, try to do work energy because it becomes easy, right? So work done equals to change in kinetic energy. And what is the work done here? F dx. Change in kinetic energy, final kinetic energy minus initial kinetic energy. Final kinetic energy is 0 because it stops. Initial is how much? Half m v naught square. And what is the force here? M into A. M is constant, take it outside. A is minus x square dx equals to minus half m v naught square. This minus and these things you take it, then you will be left with what? X square dx equals to v naught square by 2. Then you get what? X square dx is what? X cube by 3. X is varying from 0 to somewhere x. So x cube by 3 minus 0, which is equals to v naught square by 2. Then what is x here? 3 by 2 v naught square whole power 1 by 3. Right? 3 by 2 v naught square whole power 1 by 3. That's the thing. Okay. That's the thing, students. That's the thing for today's. Try to solve remaining questions. Okay. There is no point of solving every question. you should also put some efforts. So try to solve remaining questions, and okay, try to improve your speed as well. Fine, see you.